IAS Academy.
Hello all, welcome to IAS Academy and welcome back to the program Editorial Daily, where we deal with editorial analysis in daily basis, which enriches your perspectives and enhances your answer writing preparation. So let's get started with our today's session. Yes, the first article for today is which we are going to discuss an important constitutional issue, which is in India, voting cannot remain merely a statutory right. Okay, basically this states that should the right to vote in India continue to be treated merely as a statutory body, statutory right, or should it be recognized as a constitutional or a fundamental right? Okay, this is what this article is completely going about. So basically this article argues about this editorial argues that while the law still calls the voting as a statutory right, as still it calls the voting as a statutory right, judicial developments have increasingly given in the constitutional protection. Okay, so traditionally when the Supreme Court has held the right to vote is not a fundamental right, when Supreme Court has given a judgment of right, like right to vote is not a fundamental right to vote is not a fundamental right but a statutory right, which is created by the Representation of the People's Act 1950, Representation of People's Act 1950 and 1951. Okay, so some landmark judgments have supporting this view, which includes the NP Punnaswamy versus the retiring officer case in 1952, and Jyoti Basu versus the Debi Ghoshal of case 1982, and Kuldeep Nair versus the Union of India case 2006. These are few landmark judgments which have been supporting this which is supporting this judgment of Supreme Court. Okay, so these judgments held that the Parliament has the authority. It says the Parliament, the just a second. Yes, the Parliament has the main authority to regulate, or has the authority to regulate the qualifications, the disqualifications, and the electoral procedures. Okay, so as we know, although the right to vote remains statutory, the Supreme Court has gradually constitutionalized the several aspects of the electoral processes, where we can see few judgments of a few important judgments like Union of India versus Association of Democratic Reforms case 2002, in which the voters have the right to know the criminal background, educational qualifications, and the assets of the candidates. Okay, and this was linked to Article 19 Clause 1 of Subclause A. 19 Clause 1 Subclause A, which is the freedom of speech and expression. Okay, next there are few cases which we can talk about. Okay, let us see this article in a complete manner and discuss it in a very detailed way. Let's see that. Yes, we are talking about the topic in India, voting cannot remain merely a statutory right. Okay, so how can we link this article to our syllabuses? We can link to GS paper 2 under the topics like Indian Constitution, historical underpinnings, the evolution, the features, the amendments, the significant provisions, and the basic structure of Constitution, and also specifically to the fundamental rights. And also in GS paper 2, we can link this article to salient features of the Representation of People's Act, and also to the structure and organization and functioning of the judiciary, the significant Supreme Court judgments also we can link this article to. Okay, now let's see the context of the topic. The context of this topic goes like: a recent demand to recognize this voting as a fundamental right has received a long-standing constitutional debate. Okay, while the Supreme Court has held the voting to be a statutory right, it evolving jurisprudence has constitutionalized the key facets of the electoral processes, which is creating the stark paradox. Okay, yes, when coming to the introduction of the topic, how could we come up is, for every 7 decades, remember this, for every 7 decades, the right to vote has been treated as a mere statutory entitlement. Over 7 decades, the right to vote has been treated as a mere statutory entitlement under the Representation of People's Act. But yet, these landmark judgments have empowered these voters as the constitutional actors. This creates an anomaly. What is that anomaly? While the right not to vote, that is nota, which we see in the electoral barrel, and the right to know the enjoy constitutional protection, the core right to vote itself remains a statutory privilege. Okay, yes, Coming to the traditional stance, which is the voting as a statutory right, which we see in that, first we can see is the voting and the contesting creations of the statute. Like the Supreme Court has consistently held that the right to vote and contest in the elections are not derived from the Constitution or common law, but are creation of the statute. Okay, so the rights are governed entirely by the laws which are made by the Parliament. Okay, yes. What are the key judgments as we spoke previously? The NP Punnaswamy versus the retiring officers case 1952. We can see this Jyoti Basu versus Debi Ghoshal case of 1982, and Kuldeep Nair versus the Union of India case 2006 we have seen, which is the constitutional bench. Okay, yes. So these landmark rulings have reaffirmed that the right to vote is a fundamental right and is subjected to the legislative control. Okay, by this cases the Supreme Court has stated that, from this it has been stated that the right to vote is not a fundamental right and is subjected to a legislative control. Okay, so coming to this legal logic, what happens is, see, the Constitution does not expressly enumerate the right to vote in Part 3 of the Constitution, which is in the fundamental rights. Therefore, the Parliament has the authority to prescribe qualifications, disqualification, and the procedure relating to the elections. Okay, yes. Coming to the constitutionalizing the poll process, how come it happens is, first is linked to Article 19 clause 1 of subclause A. Okay, what is Article 19 clause 1 subclause A is freedom of speech and expression. Freedom of speech and expression. Okay, since the early 2000s, the court began linking the electoral process to Article 19 clause 1 subclause A, which is the freedom of speech and expression. Okay, next is landmark judgments. There are few landmark judgments as we have discussed in that. The Union of India versus ADR 2002. In this case, the voters have a fundamental right to know the criminal background, the educational and the financial antecedents of the candidates to make an informed choice. Okay. Next, the next case is PUCL versus Union of India case 2003. In this case, it stated that it held that the freedom of voting, that is informed choice, is a fundamental right, even if the right to vote itself is a statutory. Okay. Next is the Nota judgment in 2013. In this judgment, this judgment has recognized the option to reject all the candidates and the secrecy of the ballot as forms of political expression under Article 19 clause 1 subclause A. Okay, this is what the landmark judgments are. Next is expanding the constitutional protections. By how? By informed choice, right to reject, and the ballot secrecy. Okay, so the court has constitutionally has protected the right to know, the right to reject, and the right to secrecy, yet the act of voting itself remains statutory. Okay, yes. Coming to the constitutional paradox, which we can say, like, see, right to reject all candidates, that is nota, right to make an informed choice, right to secrecy of ballot. These are the rights constitutionally protected. Okay, yes. Versus the vote, act to casting votes still a statutory, as we have seen in the last thing, it is the same. So these progressive rulings have created this constitutional anomaly. Like, the Constitution protects the right to reject all candidates, the right to make an informed choice, and the right to ballot secrecy. Okay, yet though the right to vote, yet the very act of casting a vote to choose a candidate is treated as a mere statutory entitlement. So Anup Barnwal versus the Union of India case of 2003 showed the shift in this judicial thinking, where the Justice Ajay, just a second, it is Ajay Rastogi's. It is Justice Ajay Rastogi who has separate the opinion expressively, which has favored the recognizing the voting as a constitutional and a fundamental right. Okay. Yes. Coming to the basic structure and the Article 326 linkage, we have this Article 326 and the basic structure of the Constitution, how it is linked to this article is basically, first thing we will see the basic structure doctrine. Basic structure doctrine, where we can say, see, in Keshwanand Bharati case, which is in 1973, which is a very popular case, and Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan case of 1975, and that court held that democracy and free and fair elections are part of the constitution's basic structure, which the court has been set. So it is basically incongruous to, just a second, yes, it is encourageous to agree that the democracy is the basic to the constitution, but the citizens vote, the very instrument of democracy, is merely the statutory. Okay, next, article 326, which is the constitutional mandate. Article 326 tells about the constitutional mandate, where elections to the house of the people and the legislative assemblies of the state shall be on the basis of the universal adult suffrage. Okay, yes, basically the right to vote when we have is when we attain age of 18, we will be having vote access. Okay, so basically this article 326, which guarantees the universal adult suffrage by entitling the every citizen above 18 years to register as a elector. Okay, so the core entitlement flows directly from the constitution itself. Okay, yes, coming to the statute can regulate, not deny core right. Okay, see, People's Representation of People's Act 1950, Representation of People Act 1941, which is the core of the constitution, right? Okay, see, the parliament can regulate the mechanics, that is the age, the residency, the disqualifications. So but the core right of the eligible citizen to participate in the democratic process cannot be reduced to a statutory privilege. Okay, next, this is how we can talk about this article in a very clear manner. And coming up to the conclusion of this topic, we can say that the distinction between the statutory and the constitutional rights regarding the voting may have served a purpose in the republic early years. Okay, so however, the court's own decisions have steadily buried this line. It is time for the Supreme Court to revisit this old doctrine. Okay, so while the parliament can regulate the mechanism of the election, the core right of an eligible citizen participating in the democratic process cannot remain a constitutional orphan. Okay, yes, coming to few key terminologies and high impact terminologies from this article, which we can take up is, first is the statutory entitlement or the statutory privilege. What is this? It is a right which is created and regulated by the ordinary law, like the Representation of People's Act, which can be amended easily and can be opposed to fundamental constitutional rights. Okay, next is the constitutionalizing the poll process. Like, this is nothing but this is a judicial trend of elevating various aspects of elections, like candidates disclosure to the status of the fundamental rights under article 19 clause 1 subclause a. Okay, next is the constitutional orphan. What is this constitutional orphan? It is a powerful metaphor which is describing the right to vote, an essential democratic right which is left without the protective umbrella of part 3, that is fundamental rights of the constitution. Okay, next is the universal adult suffrage, which is article 326. It is nothing but the constitutional principle that guarantees the right to be registered as a voter to all the adult citizens, which are forming the bedrock of the Indian democracy. Okay, next is the basic structure doctrine. What is this basic structure doctrine? It is the judicial principle that certain the fundamental features of the constitution, like democracy and the free fair elections, which cannot be altered or destroyed by the parliament. Okay, these are the few key terminologies and the high impact terminologies which we can take out from this article. Okay, yes, let's see the next article. Yes, the next article for today is AI governance and a voice for the global south. Okay, see, the AI governance and a voice for the global south. This article, this editorial, which connects the artificial intelligence, it connects the global governance, the geopolitics, and the Indian leadership aspirations. So, the basic central theme is that India should not merely become a consumer of the AI technologies, but should shape the global AI governance by representing the interests of the global South. This is what the central theme is. Okay, basically, this artificial intelligence, the AI, is rapidly transforming the economies, the governance, the healthcare, the education, and the security. So, however, as this AI also raises the concerns which is regarding the data privacy, the bias, the misinformation, the monopolies, the cyber security, and the digital inequality. Okay, so in this context, India hosted the India AI Impact Summit in February 2026. India Impact AI Summit, which is held in February 2026. Okay, so which focused mainly on addressing the AI needs of developing countries and giving the global south a stronger voice in international AI governance. Okay, so basically earlier summits such as this Bletchley Park Summit, which is held in 2023, the Seoul Summit of 2024, and the Paris AI Summit of 2025, these summits mainly focused on the catastrophic AI risk and safety. Okay, so however, now India's AI summit shifted the discussion completely to the inclusive of the AI development, building the AI capacity in developing countries, and affordable AI access and digital public infrastructures, the responsible innovation, and AI for the sustainable development. So this reflects the India's effort to make the AI governance more equitable. Okay, so, and this article basically highlights that India faces a difficult choice, or on one side, and on one side, it has the strengthened strategic relations with the United States, which is particularly in the semiconductor supply chains, which we have taken up, and the advanced technologies. On the other hand, also, India has traditionally positioned itself as a leader of the global south. India placed its position as a placed its relation as, just a second. Okay, it has placed it itself as a leader of the global south, which is advocating the technologies and technological equality and the equity and the digital sovereignty. So the concern is that excessive dependency on foreign AI technologies may reduce the India's strategic autonomy. Okay, this is what the major concern it is rising about. There are many challenges before India now, like what we say, dependency on the foreign AI models, might be the data consolidations, colonizations, the weak domestic AI ecosystem, and all. There are few more risks which we can talk about. We will see this completely, this article about, and how can we link this to the subject of RGS, and we'll see in a detailed manner. Let's see. And yes, the topic is the AI governance and voice for the global south, which is taken from the source, The Hindu. Okay, we can link this article to the paper of GS paper 2, which is the bilateral, regional, and global groupings and agreements which is involving India or affecting India's interests, effect of the political and the politics of development and developing countries on India interests. Okay, like global south diplomacy and all. Okay, in the same GS paper 3, next in GS paper 3, we can link this article to the awareness in the fields of IT, space, basically the science and technology, computers, the robotics, nanotechnology like artificial intelligence, AI, and issues which is relating to the intellectual property rights. Okay, yes. Let's see the context of the topic. The context of the topic is basically the Indian AI Impact Summit, which is held in February 2026. The following this summit in 2026, India's strategic positioning in this AI governance is shifting. Okay, while initially the campaignings that's campaigning the global south, India's recent alignment with the US tech interests through initiatives like the Pax Silica and all, the signals a pivot towards a middle power stance. So this raises concerns about the India compromising its strategic autonomy to becoming a mere extraction site for American big tech. Okay, coming to the introduction of the topic, when we see, we can write like, in February 2026, when the summit has happened, the India AI Impact Summit deliberately focused on the immediate real world harms of AI affecting the global south. Okay, which is departing from the Western summits that fixed on abstract catastrophic risks. Okay, so however, India's subsequent policy momentum has shifted towards a middle power disclosure, okay, discourse, which is prioritizing the capital accumulation and the domestic adoption, like via the alignment with the US dominated supply chains. So this editorial as critically examines the dilemma, the warming that without robust indigenous innovations and the collective global south bargaining. Okay, so India risks falling into a new form of technological dependency. Okay, now let's see what is this the middle power dilemma and the pax silica is. First is the strategic shift. What is the strategic shift is India has increasingly has sought to position itself alongside the developed economies like the Japan and the European nation. So this creates a middle power narrative. Okay, yes. What is this Pax Silica Alliance then? Pax Silica Alliance is nothing but it is a US dominated semiconductor supply chain alliance, which India joined this Pax Silica, agreeing to pro innovation regulatory approach. Okay. Next, the next is the cost of the realignment. What is the cost of this realignment? Is this diplomatic, repositioning comes to a cost of global South global South solidarity, and it comprises India's strategic autonomy. Okay, so treating India as a technological peer to advance the economies ignores its contrasting socio-economic realities and the lower per capita metrics. Okay, yes. Next is when we see the threat of technological dependency, which is the social media story repeat. Okay, see, when we see this, the US is heavily pushing the global adoption of its AI tech while simultaneously showing the disinterest in the multilateral AI governance. Okay, so there is a grave risk of repeating this social media story, like where the economic value and the profit, this profit occur entirely to the America big tech, and while the user harms, the democratic disruptions and the the externalities are dumped on the domestic markets like India. Okay, so instead of being an equal partner, India risks becoming a mere site of extraction. Okay, which is providing the cheap labor for the data labeling and land and water for the data centers and minerals and manufacturers to sustain US tech hegemony. Okay, yes. The next one is domestic vulnerabilities and lack of guardrails. What is this domestic vulnerability and lacking of guardrails is? First is the resource exploitation. Like, see, for developing a company, when a company is coming from US or something and they are starting a company in India, though we are giving all the resources to them, we are giving them the what the minerals what they are needed and everything which we are giving for them to build a company, that is we call the resource exploitation. See, the push for this AI infrastructure has led to the local displacement, example the sanctioning land for the data centers, like triggering the protests. Okay, yes. Next is data scraping. Like, see, the American companies are scraping the public content. They are scraping the public content to build a language and indigenous knowledge data sheets without meaningful guardrails to protect the local communities. Okay. Next is innovation deficit. What is this innovation deficit is? Basically, India lacks this fundamental AI innovation. So it remains unable to compete in creating the global foundational models, and its semiconductor development is currently stuck at low value assembly stage. Okay. Yes, these are the few things which we can see in the domestic vulnerabilities and lack of guardrails. Okay. Yes. Moving forward, the threat of this technology dependence, that is the social media story, which repeats the same thing as, see, the US push and the global risks. Like, see, the US is heavily pushing the global adoption of its AI technology, and simultaneously it shows the disinterest in the multilateral AI governance. Okay. Next, the social media story which is repeating. What is that social media story which is being repeating is, it is the profit and value occur to American big tech and harms and costs dumped on the domestic markets like India. Okay. Yes, obviously, see, this Meta might be this Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, anything, whatever it is coming to our India, it is like it using the user harms, the democratic disruptions, the externalities and all. Okay. So economic value and profit secure entirely to the American big tech, and user harms, the democratic disruptions, the externalities are dumped onto the domestic countries like our country, India. Okay, next. Next is site of extraction, not the partner. Okay, see, we have cheap labor like data labeling, where we are working in a company, land and water, which is for data center, which we are providing, and minerals for the chips and devices to manufacture, we are giving, right? Everything we are giving, that is the site of extraction, not partner. Okay, so instead of being an equal partner, India risks are becoming a mere site of extraction, which is providing the cheap labor, land, water, and minerals, and the to sustain the US tech hegemony. Okay, yes. Coming to the same domestic vulnerabilities and lack of guardrails, we can see, which is the resource exploitation, as we have spoken, like the push to the AI infrastructure has led to the local displacements, like the sanctioning of land for the data centers and triggering the protests. Next is data scraping. Data scraping is nothing but, as we have talked, we have said previously, that is where the American companies are scraping the public content to build the language, which is and indigenous knowledge data sets without meaningful guardrails to protect the local communities. Okay, next is innovation deficit. As we know, like India lacks the fundamental AI innovation, which it remains unable to compete in creating the global foundational models, and its semiconductor development is currently stuck to a low value assembly stages, as we have seen in the previous slide. Okay, yes. When we say yes, however, we are using this chat GPT, GPT-4, Gemini, what you called Claude, or whatever. Okay, with whatever the company is, resources are being provided from our side. Okay, yes. Coming to the conclusion of the topic, how can we come up with the conclusion? Is basically as this heterogeneous as the as heterogeneous as the global south it is can and global south is, it can act as a powerful counterweight to the hegemony of big tech of America if properly unfilled. Okay, so India faces a stark choice between the dependency of foreign tech architecture and true leadership in the AI governance. So by utilizing its political heft and the technical capacity to build the shared regulatory and technical institutions across this global south, India can ensure that AI governance norms are equitable and that technology's benefits are shared by the people safely. Okay? Yes. Coming to the high impact terminologies and keywords which we can take up from this article is, first is the middle power dilemma. What is this middle power dilemma? It is nothing but is a tension that a country faces when trying to align diplomatically with the advanced high income nations, which despite having the socio-economical realities of a developing nation. Okay. Next is Pax Silica. What is this Pax Silica is? It is a geopolitical term which is referring to a US or dominated alliance which is controlling the global semiconductor and tech supply chain. Okay. Next. Next is the strategic autonomy. What is the strategic autonomy is? It is basically a state's ability to pursue its national interests and adopt the independent foreign and technological policies without being constrained by the external powers or alliances. Okay, next. Next is the multi-stakeholder governance. What is this multi-stakeholder governance is? It is generally a governance model that includes the government, the civil society, the private sector, and the non-profits in decision-making process. Okay. Next is the foundational models. What are these foundational models? These are the large-scale core AI models like ChatGPT, might be the Gemini or anything, which is trained on the vast amount of data that serves as a base for numerous other specific AI applications. Okay. Yes. Next is the data extraction or the technological colonialism. What is this? Means this is generally a practice where this foreign corporations exploit a developing nation's resources like the data, the cheap labor, land, water, and everything to build the technologies and repatriating the profits while leaving behind social and environmental harms. Okay, this is what the article which we can talk about, and these are the few terminologies, and we have seen the conclusion also. Okay, next. Yes, These are the two articles which we have seen. Basically both the articles which underscores a common constitutional and the governance principle, like strong democracies, and which requires both empowered citizens and the responsible institutions. So whether it is protecting the citizens right to vote, or shaping an inclusive framework for AI governance, India stands at a crucial crossroads where democratic values must evolve alongside the technological processes. Okay, basically together these editorials convey that the future of the India's democracy will always depend not only on the free and the fair elections, but also on how it governs the emerging technologies in a manner that safeguards the rights, which promotes the innovation and ensures the equitable development. So by strengthening this democratic participation at home and campaigning these responsible global governance abroad, India can emerge as a leading voice in building a just, inclusive, and resilient 21st century world order. Okay, so basically this is what both the article is talking about. Okay, yes, I hope everyone liked this video. If you want a detailed PDF on on this editorials, do visit our website and download it from there. The links are provided in the description below. Do like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more editorial analysis and for current affairs related issues and anything. And do follow our Instagram account and the Telegram accounts for your UPSC preparations. And yes, I'll see you all tomorrow with another editorial analysis. Thank you.